watching Bookmarks, the show about books and people that talk about books. As you may know, unless you've been living in a subterranean cavern or off-world, we are in the middle of a heated political debate. Both parties are engaged in a conflict over control of the federal government. They're finding new ways to disagree with each other with each passing day. One of the key points of contention is the economy. What is it, and how do we fix it? Many people have had many suggestions, from legalizing gay marriage and taxing it at a higher rate, to cutting defense spending by making soldiers pay for their own food, vehicles, and clothing. My guest today has a rather unusual suggestion that has drawn criticism from politicians on both sides of the aisle. He has a new book out called Poor in Spirit: Why the Middle Class, the Job Creators, and the Federal Government Need to End Poverty Today, in which he spells out his plan in greater detail. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, author and political commentator, Gene Pocket. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for having me. Let's get right to it. You're proposing some pretty bizarre legislation. I wouldn't characterize it as bizarre, Bjorn. There are many people, members of both parties, who've called it both fiscally and morally responsible. Why don't you just walk us through it? Spell it out for the layman. I'll speak slowly so you can keep up. I appreciate it. Look, Bjorn, the situation is this. We've got a deficit that's so huge that if I told you the number, you wouldn't even know what I was talking about. That's how big it is. So let me just say this. We spent years, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out ways to raise revenue. A lot of people want to point to the job creators. The wealthy, we got 1%. 1% of people carrying this country. 1% working to keep this country solvent while the poor sit at home waiting for a handout. Are you saying the 1% are running this country? I'm saying the 1% are saving this country by promoting growth, by creating jobs, by focusing on revenue instead of relief. It's time we as American people said enough. We're not going to let the poor dictate what we do as a country anymore. That's why I'm proposing tax cuts for the wealthy, for the job creators, for the innovators, for the motivators, and tax hikes for the poor. If they want to suckle at the government teat, they're going to have to pay for it. The free ride gravy train is over. It's time to get off or pay for a ticket. You're effectively talking about taxing the most needy among us. Don't buy into this populist lie that the poor are somehow needy. The poor are greedy. And it's time we as the American people stood up and said enough is enough. Where are the middle class in all this? They won't be affected. They're not going to be affected by this. Let me make sure that I understand you. You want those with the most to pay less and those with the least to pay more? I want those with the least to contribute to society. Schools are not a right. Roads are not a right. Security is not a right. These things have to be paid for. And if the fiscally irresponsible want access to these things, they're going to have to pitch in a little bit. And if they can't or won't, there has to be consequences, Bjorn. There are other forms of payment. Are you talking about indentured servitude? I'm talking about working for what you have. Look, Bjorn, I go into very descriptive detail in my book about how to deal with these deadbeats. Well, I'm just kind of curious. What exactly are we talking here? Is it debtor's prison, incarceration, slavery? These are just a few of the changes I'm promoting in my book. Look, Bjorn, it's time for us to redress the power balance here in this country. We got a majority, a consensus of poverty that has somehow overtaken the shrinking minority. And this minority, they're demonized every day in the press. Every day in the media you see some story about the rich and how bad they are. We've got to recognize that we have a consensus of poverty that is controlling the minority, the wealthy, the 1%, the job creators. It's time we as the American people recognize this imbalance, and did something about it. Something's got to change. Something has got to change because we cannot let this go on. We cannot let the poor keep the rich hostage. It's time for Americans to stand up and say enough is enough. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Pocket. Thanks for being here. It's been eye-opening. Coming up after the break, we look at a troubling trend among teens called book smelling. I'm Bjorn Bjorgen, and you're watching Bookmarks.